which means we're going to look at the operator synth, the different kinds of filters in case you don't know what they are, like low pass, high pass, band pass, and notch. And we're going to look at some other Ableton devices where you can find those filter shapes to get an idea of where they show up, how to recognize them, and what to do with them. For that part, I'm going to show you this track I'm working on and show you where I use these filters in a real track so it makes sense, so you can see them in applications. That means, of course, the creative stuff, low pass filter sweeps to make buildups in your tracks. Everybody knows that. Those are fun. But even more than that, for technical mixing, you cannot make modern bass music without a ton of filters. High pass filters, even in your low end, and low pass filters, and even some notch kind of stuff. So that's what we're gonna do today, and it's gonna be cool, and I wanna see your comments. So let me get the video up. How y'all doing? Thanks for watching the live stuff last night. That was kind of fun. I did a little live dub, and yesterday we talked about oscillators in the sound design universe. In the big picture of sound design, we're doing what's called subtractive sound design. So you take like a waveform and you subtract some of the tone with filters. Later we're going to subtract some of the volume with envelopes like attack, decay, sustain, release, and then applying some modulators and things like that. So this is kind of a logical progress. It goes oscillator, filter, envelope, and then LFO and arpeggiator, whatever else. So that's where we are in the world. There is my video. Give me a yes if you can hear everything. Yeah, I can hear it. Irka, what's up, man? Dude, I'm doing this whole broadcast at I wanted to tell you I was doing this whole broadcast at 432 hertz, but that would not be true. Dan Pratt, Nate Miller, what's going on? All right, so if you can hear me, we're going to keep going. Let me just bop right on into the Ableton universe. So to start off, you can see on the right side of the screen, real basic stuff, there's a few filter shapes. The one with the mouse on the top left corner in the lows column, that is a high pass filter. Don't get confused. High pass filters let the highs go through, they cut off the lows. Next, in the mid section, we have a notch filter. It's like a V shape where it takes a little bit out of the middle and you can sweep it around, which is kind of useful. And then on the top end, we have a low pass filter. It operates to cut off high frequencies and let the lows pass through. So if you get confused, remember the name. Low pass filter lets the lows pass through. High pass filter lets the highs pass through. And then for the mid-range, you can use a notch filter. Now, band pass filter down at the bottom, BPF, that's like a combination of high and low pass together. So it lets a band in the middle pass through. And there's a classic preset called the telephone preset that sounds like bad vocals on audio. And if you have 250 hertz to 4,000, I'm typing this in right now, to 4,000 hertz band pass equals telephone preset. And the reason I'm typing that in is you've heard this on albums when there's, you know, like they're singing, there's verse, chorus, and everything, and then like there'll be this overdub part where the singer says some extra line and this kind of high-pitched sort of squeaky voice. That's like the telephone voice where they cut off the bass, cut down the highs, and make it like only this mid-range kind of squawky sort of thing. And by the way, one of the reasons it's hard to mix audio, it's hard to mix music for mobile phones is because they're totally optimized for voice with bandpass filters. So they're not trying to make bass, they're not trying to make high frequencies, they're trying to make mid-range for vocals. But anyway, those are some diagrams, and in the middle box here, there are some EQs that we use. So there's the low shelf EQ, the parametric EQ, and high shelf EQ. So in the world of filters and EQs, these are your tools. I got a question for you. What is missing out of this EQ picture? If you think about the tools or devices or stuff you see in DJ booths or sound systems, which kind of EQ is missing? We got parametric, we got shelf EQs, we got high pass filters, low pass filters, notch filters, and bandpass. Anybody want to type in what's missing? There's a one kind of EQ that's not in here that you do see all over the place. Here's a clue. It has sliders. There's a whole bunch of sliders in a row, and you can slide them up and down. I hate it how there's a delay. There's like a 45-second delay when I have to wait for you to hear me and then type in, and then I see it back on the chat. So if you're typing the right answer, congratulations. The EQ that's missing is graphic EQ, where you have all those lines of sliders and you can pick each band and slide them up and down. We don't use those in electronic music very much. They have a lot of phase problems. Like you can really mess up your phase, especially in the low end, playing with graphic EQs. They do have some applications and they are useful sometimes, like if you have a room with bad acoustics, but we're not going to talk about graphic EQ. What we are going to talk about is operator synth. And here it is. So I made this instrument to teach with where we've got a selector for filter types. So to make sure you are looking at the same thing I'm looking at, look here in the filter box. And as I turn the filter select knob, you can see the shape is changing. Here's our list of options. That little thing that looks like kind of like a number 7 that fell over right there, high pass filter. So that's going to cut off our low end. And we go through a bit. Let's listen to these shit. So here we are at the bottom, and I'm going to move something. So that's a low-pass filter cutting off the high frequencies. The two main controls for filters, anytime you walk up to any synth in the world, grab the cutoff frequency, or the filter frequency, and the resonance. The cutoff frequency tells you which frequency the filter is operating at. So with the low-pass filter, if the frequency is at 2 kilohertz, we're basically cutting off everything above that. And it's not an exactly hard line, there's a slope, but that's another story. And then the resonance adds a volume bump around the cutoff frequency to exaggerate it a little bit. Hey Finn Max, what's up? And tweaking filters is super fun. So that's what the low-pass filter sounds like. What's next in the lineup? High-pass filter. Yeah, easy enough. And as you roll it up, you can hear the lows are disappearing. And then if you add some resonance, you get a little more exaggerated thing. And watch out with adding resonance on low frequency sounds because you can blow out your amps and speakers. It's like adding volume basically down there. So next filter type. I know I'm slamming through these, but I'm sure you're pretty familiar with what they are and kind of how they sound. So I don't want to go too boring on this. I'm just going to do a quick little tour. Here is the bandpass filter shape. And notice that as I get up to the high part, there's kind of like no high frequencies in this sound, so you don't hear a whole lot. Woof. Crazy reso. And, oops, not the slope. Bandpass, then notch filter. So this is going to cut out a little section of the middle. And that has a cool sound too. Finally, there's a cool filter called SVF, which is state variable filter. I want to spend a little more time on this one because this one morphs between all the different types. So if I set the frequency in the middle, the way to play with this one is using this morphing knob, and you can see it's changing in this middle field with some numbers and stuff. But I thought actually a better way to teach this would be with auto filter so you can actually see what's happening. So let me kind of undo the filters here. So we're hearing the full range sound. I want you to sort of see what the filter is doing with the SVF shape. State variable filter, it's going to morph between different ones. So here's the morph knob. And watch what the filter shape does and hear how it sounds. We just went from a low-pass filter to a high-pass filter. In the middle, it's bandpass. And if we keep going, it's going to turn into a notch. So these are really fun because it's like with just a couple of knobs, you get all these different shapes to play with. And as you're tweaking them, you can change the shape to make something, well, there's a lot of things you could do with it. So to finish up with the morph filter, do you see there's little letters under the morph knob like LP, BP? So that's telling you we're at low pass going into bandpass shape. Now we're in bandpass, heading towards the high pass shape. Okay, bandpass to high pass morph, then high pass morph to notch filter, and finally at the top you have a notch filter morphing to a low pass filter. And this is such a cool sound. You can play with this all day long and use it to make build-ups, use it to make your sounds continually sort of shift. It's a little bit like a wavetable kind of a sound. If you had like a bunch of different waveforms that all had different filter settings and you were morphing between them, that's sort of how the morph filter moves. And it has this kind of vowel kind of sound. Like if you're like singing along with your synths the way I do, you'll find yourself kind of going like wow, wow. It makes your mouth want to go like wow, wow, wow. We were talking about that yesterday with Dan Pratt. It's like you want to go like wow. So the morphing filters are super cool, but let me turn that off so we don't get lost. If you have any questions right now, let me get over back here. Hey, Steve on camera. Anytime you have any questions, type them into the chat. I want to know what you're thinking about, or if you have like an idea or a tangent or something, go ahead and type it in the chat window and I'll come back to answer questions because I want this to be helpful for you. So let me know if you're good so far. Type in good, and I'm going to keep going and get into some examples of how I use filters, especially for low-end mixing, because that's such an important thing to get right, and we always want it to sound good. So I'm going to minimize our universal filter symbols. The fun thing is once you know what these symbols are, they're gonna become like as familiar to you as like, you know, a pencil or a pen or something. You'll start to see them everywhere. So let's do, I want to do something fun first. I was just playing with this session and I made this little thing called low pass filter effects. But don't want this to come in too loud, so let me play this right here. How's the volume right now? Is volume okay? It's good for me in the headphones. So here I am on the drums bus. So what did I do right there? Well, I put a low pass filter on my whole drums group. So first of all, I had all my drums, all these yellow channels going into one stereo bus so I could do some processing on there. And I put an effects filter. It's just a low pass filter. And what I was doing was bringing the filter down to get the high end off the drums. After it got down in the mid-range, I cut all the bass. So this track is my kick drum and the sub bass. I cut that out and was filtering the breaks. And then as I brought the filter back up with some more resonance to give that squeaky kind of sound, I got to that kind of peak feeling where it was like whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And then you drop the kick drum back in, boom, boom, unmute that to make a drop. So the point here is that you can use low pass filters for really good effects on your drum breaks. You could do it on one channel, like you could just pick, you know, one drum break and use a low pass filter on there. Or you could put it on a whole drum group, which I like to do because then you get them all at once and it's more like a master effect for your, you know, that you can do for the whole part of the track instead of just one channel. So that's a fun little thing that you can do creatively. Add some resonance as you're doing those filter sweeps because a resonant filter sweep sounds better than, you know, not. And I also mapped this, this control to go on and off. So when I get to the top of the range, you can see the auto filter plugin turns off. I put it on that knob, which is a handy trick too if you're into mapping controllers and stuff. So that's basically so you don't go through a live set with your drums filtered down and like forget that they're like that, because that's happened to me. And then you're like, how come my drums are so quiet? Like, oh shit, the filter's down. So that's a little creative effect, little hot tip for you. Let's look at, I was talking about technical mixing with filters. So let's, what is on this track and how is it technical? What does that mean? Let's check it out. So this is my sub bass sound. It's just one little boom. You can see it coming up on the spectrum. It's a nice bass pulse right down there at the note C, 65 hertz. And what I don't want is a super low end blah that's making a ton of crud in the track. So we start from the instrument called analog. First, I've got a low pass filter. In fact, I'm going to undo both of these. So here's the raw sound. And it doesn't even really need much low pass because this sound doesn't have a lot of high frequencies in there. But still, I want to round it out and bring it down. And since that one sound that we're using is literally only like one note right here at the note C, what I'm doing is I'm looking in this little box here on the spectrum analyzer. I put my mouse on the line where the bump is, and the mouse tells me that's the note C1 at 65 hertz. So I can pretty much filter this sound all the way down. What if I go down to 70? Did I lose anything? No. Do I still hear the sub? Yes. All right, so we're good. How about, is there anything below that sound? Well, let's go to the spectrum analyzer again. I can see that below the 65, there's a bunch of, there's some kind of frequency pressure down there that isn't really necessary in that sound. So let's roll this filter up to near 60. And here's a fun thing about resonance. Remember I said resonance adds like a volume boost right around the cutoff frequency? So if I add some resonance and sneak this up near the 60s, what it's doing is making that bump bigger, exaggerating the part that we do want, and also taking out some of the frequencies that we don't want. We're basically EQing this sound. David Goodman says, Steve, Ableton audio is super quiet. Yeah, thank you. I had it turned down when I was talking, so I'll turn it back up. Also, this is a low bass sound, so if you're on headphones or something, it might not come through very well. Thanks for pointing that out. Just to let me A/B this again. So if I bypass these two filters, there's our bass sound by itself. I got a low pass filter here to cut off the high frequencies, and a high pass filter to just get rid of the crud and to use the resonance. Use the resonance to like kind of EQ it up a little bit. So a question, why do you use auto filter to cut the unwanted frequencies instead of EQ? That's a good question. Auto filter is built a little bit differently, so it works better with low frequencies than EQ8. You can use them both, and I do have an EQ8 on here. So on the EQ8, I'm boosting the crap out of these bass notes to make them come up, but I could use filter shapes right here at EQ8. We've got high pass filters, there's the EQ shelf, parametric notch, the high shelf, and low pass filters. So we could put in a high pass filter with a steep slope, cut it up to like 60 hertz, and get pretty much the same effect as auto filter. And I'm not super into plugin design, so I don't have the whole history on this, but basically the auto filter was designed to work a little better with low frequencies. And low frequencies are hard to work with in the digital domain because they have a longer waveform that takes more time. So somehow the math on processing those frequencies is not as easy as high frequencies. I can't go very much deeper than that, but that's what I was advised to do. So I use the auto filter. Also, I just like it. It's got this analog circuit stuff in there that you can add drive and fuzz and crunch and get some cool sounds. And then you can just really easily go to LFOs and add some modulators to get your filter moving around. So I reach for auto filter a lot if I just want it in one application, like a high pass filter here. And then on EQ8, I wanted to boost up a little bit of a couple of frequencies, maybe not the 50 so much. And then I compress it and have a sidechain kick drum on there. So that's an example of some technical filter mixing. Whoa. Let's go to our next track. What are we doing with this bass line? Analog instrument. Again, I want to have some high pass filter in here because I don't want tons of lows coming through. And this one, you can hear the bass sound is moving around. I got a little bit tricky on the actual MIDI instrument. I like to use filters at the source, so if the instrument has filters built in, I like to play with them. And you can see these are, again, mapped. I put them on my two favorite knobs, cutoff frequency and resonance. But the reason you hear the filter moving around when I'm not touching anything is because in the filter panel right here, okay, in the middle of the instrument, there's this little setting that says envelope to velocity, which means the harder you press the notes, the more the filter is going to open. So when you look at the MIDI clip, as the velocity goes up, the filter opens. So maybe if I undo that velocity setting right here, now it should sound like a flat tone. Now the filter is not reacting to note velocity at all, so I can use my filter controls. And just like we were doing with the drum beats, use the low pass filter. Wow. That sounds a monster. Just like with the drum beat filter sweeps, you can use a low pass filter on your sound and get this crazy good emotional effect as you bring it up with more resonance towards high frequencies. It feels like a build-up, like something's going to happen. So I like to mute the kick drum, start with the filter down low, add a little resonance, and play through a filter sweep to drop the beat at the top. Let me do that again. Super long release on that time. So the basic technique, roll the low pass filter down, cut the kick drum, and then slowly do a filter sweep coming back up. When you get to that peak sound where the resonance is screaming, the filter is at the wide setting and you hear the high frequencies of the sound coming through, then you drop the kick drum and it's like a super awesome, well, drop, build up in a drop. And that's fun because you can do that live with any instrument in the world. You can do it on drum breaks. You can do it on a drum machine if it has, you know, filters, which it probably does. You can do it in Ableton on your whole master channel. If you want a cheap effect, put a low pass filter on your master channel, filter it down, cut the kick drum, filter it back up, drop the kick drum back in, and you're famous. It's like, it always works. It always sounds good. As long as you don't do it on every 16 bars, you know, then it gets kind of old. So that's a little creative technique you can use from the filters right inside your instruments. And then in this effect track, I split the sound high and low to have 2 different layers of it. This might be a little deeper than the beginner stuff, but it's a really great technique for bass, so I'm going to show it to you for anybody who's with me. So I split the chain. Now in the high section, I wanted a really buzzy, wide, that. So I put in a high pass filter up here, and one of these, planning to play with that as a creative effect. And I even put the wider plug-in on there because I like that one. Now, for the low one, I like the power of this low sound. I like that pressure it's making. It's got a real like nasty, buzzy kind of feel. But I had to have it at a different volume level than the high frequencies, and I wanted this low one to be in mono, not spread out wide. So I put a frequency split here. That's kind of like my crossover. And I EQ'd this one too, basically creating a bandpass filter. You know, this is a high pass filter cutting off the lows. We have a low pass filter cutting off the highs, and even a couple of bands of EQ in the middle because it had some nasty resonance. So basically what we have are 2 bass lines that come together. So the top end is nice and buzzy, the bottom end is more solid, and I think on the bottom I also probably did a side chain from the sub bass sound. So I hope that's not too technical. Another pro tip about these, it can be hard to split your sounds and mix your volume levels. What I like to do is mute one of them and bring the other one into the mix. So we're going to listen to the drums with this, the low half of this bass sound, okay? Now I've got that mixed at the right level, but if I didn't, bring it all the way down, crank up your headphones, fade that up till it gets to be kind of the right sound pressure. Now I'm going to bring the volume all the way down on this high section, on mute, and roll that back in. So that's kind of a balanced sound that fits in the mix where I can feel the low end, I can hear the high end, and it's blending with the drums. Let me know if you're good with that. Type in blend if you're down with what I just did on the bass split. That's a really cool technique because it allows you to get a huge bass sound in your mix with the highs way out in front on top and the lows nicely blended with your kick drum and low end stuff. But you have more ways to control it. That would be hard to do if I didn't split this bass sound and I was trying to only get it in the mix using volume. I would be like, oh, I don't know, I can't make it fit. Believe me, I've tried, it's hard. You really need to have a way to, sidechain compress the low end so your kick drum comes banging through, but have the high end nice and loud and stereo width. Blendo, all right, thank you. I'm glad you're with me on that one. So what are we doing? We're doing technical mixing with high-pass filters to get the lows out of the way. We're doing creative mixing with low-pass filters to do filter sweeps and everything. What is this track called? It's called Notch Wave. Let's check out the Notch Wave. There it is right there. The notch filter is moving. I think I see some automation in this channel. Wavetable filter frequency. So that frequency is moving around. And that's a great example of the notch filter because it feels like the sound, like the middle it's like hollow, it's like getting empty, like the sound is getting sucked out and then it's moving around. And when you're listening to it, it can feel like the stereo field is shifting or something is like inside your head moving around. It's a crazy feel. Just for comparison, let's keep that motion and go to a low pass filter. And low pass filters usually have what I call like a dark and a light tone. As they go down, when you lose the highs, it becomes kind of dark. What about high pass? Ooh, that sounds even better. How about band pass? Oh, boo. What I just went into right there, sorry for that long bass sound, I just went into one of the vintage circuit filter models. Instead of using the clean circuit, which is like the standard one, I went to this other one, the OSR circuit, which gives you the option of filter drive. So you can crank this up, you're adding volume to the sound coming out of the filter, and when it gets high enough, it starts to distort and break up and get fuzzy and get this real buttery kind of sound. Let me solo this track. We're going to stay on that model and crank up the filter drive so you can hear how it sounds. It sounds kind of burnt. So let's do something fun. Let's take the volume down a little bit, drop this back in the mix, and I'm going to use the filter drive setting to pull this sound up louder and get that crunchy texture that actually gets more attention. Like a distorted sound sort of comes, you hear it more up front. And I guess I should point out another thing in general about sound design is to move multiple things at the same time. So you can see in the wavetable synth, the layers were like morphing between waveforms. This was from yesterday where we talked about sine wave, triangle wave, sawtooth wave, square wave. This is slowly going between them to do some tone shaping. Then we have our filter on notch with the frequency slowly moving to give you another optical illusion for your ears. I don't know what the word is for it. It just gets more interesting. It's complex, it's developed, it's evolving slowly over time. And all these things, let me blip on camera because this is important. When you're doing sound design, the goal you should be striving towards is making original sounds. That's what you want. You want to take a stock plugin or a preset or anything and then tweak it to make it sound like your own. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one, it's really fun, so you're gonna have more fun doing it, and your music is gonna sound like a person who's alive inside the mix, having a good time. But also your audience is gonna recognize it, so when they hear your tracks, they're gonna be like, oh man, that's that person that always, does this one thing that becomes like your thing. And don't worry too much about what your thing is. You're naturally gonna find sounds that you like and do them again. That's just the way it goes. So you will develop your own style over time by just kind of like finding out what your ear is attracted to. But I want to show you the tools to do that with, because the more you tweak your sounds to make them original and have them develop over time and keep them moving so they're changing, the more your music stays interesting so people want to listen to it all the way to the end of the track and not just like skip to the next track or whatever. That's what it's all about. Special focus, climaxes. If you can do interesting sounds and build them up to a climax, people are going to play your tracks. That is the best piece of advice I wish somebody had told me. When I started making music, I didn't know what to do. I was like, I don't know, I'll do this and everything. And you figure it out over time, but if I can help you get there a little bit faster, that's what we're doing. So where are we now? We did notch filters, we did high pass and low pass, we did some technical mixing, and I believe I set up a little example over here with bandpass filters to show you a place I can kind of make one and use one without having it called a bandpass filter. So here's a lead sound that's got some delay on it. Okay, so that's the starting sound. Not really too exciting. I mean, it's not bad, but So the first thing I always do, technically, you wouldn't believe how much low frequency can be inside a high-pitched sound. On this frequency, this sound is real spiky up here, up high, but look at all that low stuff. What's that doing? Do I want that in my mix? Do I even want to think about if I want that in my mix? I do not. So, click on a high-pass filter, click it into one of the vintage circuit modes, and add some gain to bring it up louder in the mix. That's like killing two birds with one stone. You cut off the low end that you don't want, and you turn it up a little bit to get more of the part that you do want. And since it's such a fast sound that's repetitive and like blinky, it's like on and off, like da 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 da, hard attack, short release. To me, I thought I want delay on that. So I guess the first thing was I turned on the delay. Kirk, question. So when do you usually start your lessons? I want to make sure I tune in at the beginning. Noon. I'm doing 12 o'clock Eastern time all week or maybe all spring or for the whole quarantine. I'm going to start at noon and try to keep them down to 45 minutes or something so we can just cover some stuff that's usable for you without wasting all your time. So sorry you missed the beginning, but this will automatically go to replay in the Facebook group. And I think these are also copied to my YouTube channel. So I think you'll be able to grab the replay and check the beginning. And if you have any questions, hit me up in the comments and I'll be happy to review something. So this sound was, why did I choose a delay? Well, I want it to sound interesting. It was a very short sound that didn't last very long. So I thought, I'll multiply that with delay and get more of the sound echoing in space. And now, because this echo plugin has some cool options, I thought, let me kick in this filter and filter the echoes so we can hear the original sound coming through dry and then the echoes coming through filtered. So if I bring this bandpass filter down, well, that's even cooler because the echoes are kind of dark, but the original source is bright, right? Bright like high frequency, dark like lower frequency. So that's an example of a bandpass filter in action. And now that I listen to it in the mix, I get a spatial dimension off of that where the bright sounds from the original dry sound feel like they're really up front and the echoes feel like they're in the background, echoing behind me. Why is that? Does that happen in real life? Actually, it does. If you're in a big, huge room and you clap your hands and someone's far away, the high frequencies get rolled off. Or another way of thinking about it is if you're walking towards a building, if you're walking towards a party, the first thing you hear is the bass, right? The kick drum, whoomp, 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 whoomp. That's because high frequency gets lost first over distance. So if you want to make three-dimensional space in your mix, you can roll off the high frequencies to push a sound into the background like we're doing with the echoes on this sound. How cool is that? I'm liking that sound more and more. Now I got that nasty bass drone in there. And now I want to point out something about composition. This is kind of a mixing tip. A good mix has space in the mix, which means every sound has enough space for you to hear that sound. And you can do that with EQing and filtering, and you can cut off the low end, you know, a high pass filter and stuff. But an even better way to do it is at the composition stage. Write your music parts so they fit together. So for example, this track is the sub bass. Ping ping. The sub bass obviously is written in a very low octave, so it pops through low. Then the bass line is like in that lower mid range where the actual notes in the MIDI scale are in that low range space. Then these two, it's even more obvious that one of them has chords that are kind of like mid-range but higher, and then the melody is way on top. So when you put all these four tracks together, you get sounds in all the frequency ranges that are not competing with each other. They're naturally in a band where they fit together, so I don't have to do too much real technical mixing to get them in the right mix space. I don't know if I can show you that in terms of MIDI octaves. Maybe I can. What is that octave? C5, so that's like MIDI C5 up on the top of the right hand. This is C4, okay, that's cool. Where's our bass line? C2, yep, C2, G2, and then our sub bass down at C1. So if you were actually looking at a huge keyboard, it'd be like, you know, every octave on the keyboard has a different synth part playing in it. And they don't overlap, they don't get in each other's way. It makes it easier to build your mix because they're already separated into frequency ranges. And at that point, your EQing and filtering is kind of just like subtle. It's not like major reconstructive surgery trying to like force shit to work together that's on top of itself. Dan Pratt said, I've always been a delay junkie. I know, man, I use delay in every single track. It never gets old though. So I think I pretty much talked about what I wanted to do today. We looked at different waveforms. Yeah, let me come back on action cam. Whoa, Steve in the mix. So 12:40, I got a couple minutes to show you some more stuff on where you can find more on these lessons. But to review, we're in the essential basics of sound design. We're doing subtractive synthesis, which means we start with a boring basic waveform, and then we subtract tone using filter. Like yesterday, we looked at oscillators to hear the different waveforms, how they sound, like sine waves, square waves. Now we're filtering them down. I'm doing the frequency motion, I guess, like carving off the tone using filters to subtract some of the frequencies. And tomorrow we're going to do some stuff with envelopes where the sound will change over time by changing the volume. So we're subtracting amplitude and some other stuff like that. And then later in the series, we'll get into LFO modulators to move all these things again to make those bass wubs and make those pulses and make things move side to side rhythmically. And at the end, we'll put it all together with multiple layers of sounds to build up complex, interesting sounds. Why do we want to do that? Because you want original sounds in your music. You don't want to sound like you just bought the newest presets and slapped them together like a Toyota commercial or something. The goal of your sound design should be making original sounds, okay? Ideally, build them up to a climax and drop the beat using filter sweeps, using fun stuff like that. And we looked at a little bit of technical mixing, how to calculate frequencies and cut off the part of the sound that you don't want. Think about peeling potatoes. Your high-pass filter can be like you're peeling off the base, like getting rid of the part you don't want to eat, peeling potato, whatever. And then we looked at notch and bandpass filters as creative tools. So for my last little screen share thing, I want to go into the member site and show you where you can get a hands-on session lesson with this lesson in there, because these are really cool. I'm building, let me save this one. I'm going to show you the lesson first. I'm building these guided Ableton projects that are interactive. So instead of listening to me talk on video, you can download a live pack, open it up, and you get instructions right inside there. with not only me talking, but activities to do where you learn by doing it, which is the best way to do it. That's how I always like to do stuff. I want to get my hands on it right away. So when you open the session lesson, this is what you see. There's a panel on the side that says this is the filter lesson. But the main idea is to start at the top, press play, and do the lesson like this. Welcome to the essential basics of sound design. This is the filters lesson. Okay, you already know that because I already told you. Then we go through and I make it really easy for you to do all the activities. And I want to make sure you don't get lost. So this lesson is going to happen on channel 1. Select channel 1 and do Shift Tab until you can see the macro knob controls. So I'm doing it right now. I did Shift Tab. There is, oh, what's this? Our little filter buddy, our instrument where we choose our filter types. And we've got our filter slope and frequency and resonance. And we go through all the different stuff we talked about in this lesson today. You go through it right here in Ableton where you can play with it, hear it, morph it, tweak it, understand it, and learn it on your own. And not only that, but check this out. Now it's your turn. Remember, great sound design means making sounds that are so much fun they spark ideas for a new track. So what I did was I took a blank MIDI clip and put in a place where I want you to actually record MIDI notes and make music with this lesson, with the instrument. So like if you're playing with the lesson and you're having fun, which you should be, and then you're like, oh man, I want to do a new track, just do it, you know, right? Record in some MIDI notes, like add a couple audio tracks, put some loops on there. Let me run through the lesson real quick to show you what you will get when you come inside it. So there's a welcome section to find the instrument. We talk about low-pass filters. The go-to for electronic music, I explain where to use them. I give you some pro tips on it. High-pass filters with examples, with activities. Maybe I'll show you an example. These are kind of fun. So when you're looking at the instrument, watch what happens. Oh man, it's gonna come back down. So I actually recorded automation inside the lesson to give you examples of what it sounds like. Then we talk about what we heard. So again, I'm sure you're familiar with that kind of a sound. It's just me talking, telling you what did we hear, what does it mean, how do we do it, and then there's an activity where you do the exact same thing with the same knobs on the same instrument to actually learn by doing it. And we go through the bandpass filter, we go through the notch filter. Ooh, sounds hollow, middle sucked out. That's what I was trying to say in that melody line we're listening to. Morph, SVF, state variable filter, because I want you to learn this stuff and know it. Recommendation, use it on a lead because it's so much fun to tweak. Then we go into filter slope, which I didn't even touch today, but it's really useful. We talk about resonance. Warning, pro tip with the limiter, like I was saying about how resonance gets kind of loud. So I even talk about how to apply this in your sessions. Then we do filter drive circuits, limiters, effects on synths. Looks like we've got some effects in here using, and by the way, these are all Ableton stock effects. So you can use this project with Live 9, Live 10. You don't have to get any VSTs. You don't have to buy a modular synth. You can actually just do it right here. And then in the end, there's a review section. And that's it. We are at the end of the filters lesson. Okay, lots of enthusiasm. And then we review what did we learn with the slopes and the filter types and everything. For backup to read, we can go through a couple pages with our filter slope symbols and some, little directions on what's going on. And those are super fun. I love making these lessons because they basically work. So let me show you where to get it. Here's the Mixitecture member site. I decided to put all my lessons on pay what you want because we are in a strange time in the world and not everybody has a ton of cash to drop on a full course. So instead of making the essential basics of sound design, it's not like one big course anymore. You can get just the module you want. You can get the oscillator module, you can get the filter module. Here's a description of what it is, a little video about it, and when you're ready to take it home, you go like this. Where is it? Down here. Pay what you want. Now it's marked at $25, but since we're in a video and you're on camera with me, I'm going to give you a little secret. Coupon code, pay 10. Type in those letters exactly like this right here. Price goes down to 10 bucks. What if you want to pay 15? Oh, you can pay 15. What if you want to pay 20 bucks? You can pay 20 bucks. If you want to pay 25, you could. I appreciate the support to help me keep making these lessons, but it's up to you, and there's a coupon code to make it a little bit easier so you can grab these lessons, play with them, have some fun, make some music, and most importantly, share it with us in the Mixitecture Facebook group because I want to hear what you're working on, what it sounds like, what you're doing, and you can even go live and make a post where you just, like if you're working on your track and you get to the end of the day, if you don't want to record it and put it on SoundCloud and upload the link, you could just go live in the group and be like, hey, here's what I'm doing tonight. What do you think? This is what it sounds like. And share the enthusiasm of making the music. That's as good as sharing the tracks as audio. So it is 12:45. Steve wins. I wanted to keep this short. 45 minutes is not super short, but thanks for watching. If you have any questions, type them in on the chat window, and I'll get back to you after I finish this. And let me see if I missed anything. So that's it for now. So Dan, Kirk, Yirji, and Avinash, interesting people, Ben Edwards. Thanks for watching, everybody. I love doing these live videos. I'm planning to do them basically every day from now on because I am home. I'm making tracks, and the more I make music, the more I have stuff to teach you about. So let me know what you want to learn about, if you have questions about it, and what you're doing with your music because I want to hear it. Do-do-do-do-do. Oh, Dan Prats needs a post approval. I got to get off here. All right, thanks, everybody. I'll see you soon.